All right, well, let's go to Bobby Nightingale Jr. He covers the Reds and has for a number of years, extraordinarily well for Cincinnati.com. He's out in Goodyear, Arizona, follows the team each and every day, all through the spring training and the regular season. Bobby, good morning. You're not standing outside in the wind and the rain and all the other sort of stuff. I'm hoping it's nice out there in AZ right now.
Finally, yeah, it's finally getting closer to the 70s. I think it's 80s next week. So finally, like true spring training weather versus what it's been so far.
We were just having an extended conversation about Christian Encarnacion-Strand. Okay, now everybody knows, you got to say it, but everybody knows this is spring training. But the guy's 23. He was a college player at a big-time program at Oklahoma State. He's not going to cover off the ball coming off an extraordinary minor league season a year ago. What are his chances of making this team?
Better than they were, a week and a half ago, but I'd still put him kind of just a little bit. I mean, he's only played maybe 2 months above A-ball. I mean, there's some expectations that it's been great to see him swing the bat the way he is. That's kind of his scouting report. I mean, everywhere he's been, he's hit. In college, in the minor leagues. That's always been, a bat first guy. He hit 30 homers last year with, I think, like 120-some RBIs, which were top 5 in all of the minor leagues. So, I mean, this is his scouting report. He can hit, and he's proven he can do that against, higher quality pitching. He's impressed with kind of his approach at the plate. Even in 2 strikes, he changes his swing, shortens up, and able to get hits that way. So you can tell, I mean, he's a smart hitter, but it's one of those, he doesn't have like a clear path to playing time. I think that's probably the biggest difference when I hear people say like Jonathan India, he came out of kind of a non-roster invitee, came out of minor league camp and pushed his way to the starting lineup. But that was a little bit different because the Reds didn't have a shortstop at the time. They ended up moving Eugenio Suarez there. That opened up second base, which created the spot. Whereas there's not really that big of a hole in the infield. They're testing him out at first base, a position he hasn't played a ton. So I'm not expecting him to make the opening day roster at this point, but I think he's at least deserved to be in the conversation, which, is a little bit unexpected for a guy who, again, has only played 2 months above A-ball.
Does his long-term position, now he's listed when you go just look him up on the internet, he's listed as a third baseman, but he's been playing primarily at first base in the games he's played so far in spring training. Does first base appear to be his long-term position?
I think that's probably what they're planning on. I mean, it's just based off all the shortstop prospects they have. I think they're looking at it. If you look long term, they should have better athletes able to slide over to third base. Like Spencer Steer, he's going to get the first crack at it this year. I'd put him as a better defender at third base than Encarnacion-Strand. So I think first base, especially it's the last guaranteed year of Joey Votto's contracts. You have to start thinking about guys that could fit over there, and he certainly has the bat to play first base, which not a lot of guys do. Has the power to play there every day.
That's an interesting thing, Bobby, that a lot of us maybe don't necessarily think about is that, when you look at, and you made reference to the India thing and moving Suarez and that kind of thing, the Reds have already committed that Stevenson is going to be used a lot at DH and at first base and not just exclusively behind the plate. You start connecting dots and you say to yourself, and of course everything can change, but you say to yourself, okay, Votto, last year of his deal, he probably leaves at the end of the season. So now looking ahead to first base in that position, does a guy like Encarnacion-Strand become the victim of now all of a sudden? And look, we don't know if this guy's going to be a good major league player. Like you just said, he's barely played above single A. But these are the things that people are paid a lot of money to start thinking about well ahead of time. Does he get stunted behind Stevenson getting a lot of playing time at first? Or is he a guy maybe you just look at and say, you know what, heck with third, heck with first, this guy can hit, and he's going to be the DH?
I think it's probably more likely Stevenson would be your more regular DH than Encarnacion-Strand, just based off the fact, Stevenson, long-term, they still see him as a catcher. I think this year is more about, one, our lineup isn't going to produce a ton of runs, at least on paper. So if you get Tyler Stevenson's name in the lineup, that's one way to fix it. And two, he did miss a ton of time last year. That's a lot of at-bats. He's still a young guy, but missing 300, 400 at-bats that he could have had last year, you want him to get those back. So I still think long-term they still see Stevenson as a guy, okay, if we want him to be catching 90 games instead of, I think their goal is around 65 this year, I think they're still comfortable doing that. I think it's just one of those kind of circumstances are pushing him more towards DH and first base. But I don't think long term they see Tyler Stevenson as, okay, he has to play first base unless something happens where like he gets a concussion. Obviously, that'll change kind of all the plans behind the plate. But they're still confident in him as their starting catcher.
Well, the guy who's gotten more pub than anybody as far as the young players are concerned is De La Cruz. And the other day, he turns around a 100-mile-per-hour fastball from, of all people, Aroldis Chapman, as a right-handed batter, triples, comes up later in the game as a left-handed batter, homers. I know you've been writing about him quite a bit here lately. What are people saying about this guy? As advertised, don't get too excited yet. Let's wait and see. What's realistic for him to start the year? Minor leagues, probably?
Yeah, I think it's almost certainly the minor leagues. I don't think he's done enough to say, like, he's not consistent enough defensively. You can tell that in drills where it's like, okay, this guy has to be your starting shortstop. The tools are all there. I mean, he's definitely – if he's not the fastest guy on the team, he's top 2 or 3. Might have the most power on the team. His arm's probably the strongest or top 2 or 3 on the team. So, I mean, he stands out in so many different ways. All the tools are there, but you can just tell, like, consistency-wise, I think there's another level he needs to get to. You can make 30 errors in the minor leagues. If you do that in the majors, that's killing your pitchers. That's, there's a lot more at stake. So I think that's the biggest thing is, one, he has to cut down on, become a little bit more consistent defensively. I mean, he could be a great defender. It's just a little bit consistency that you can tell. I mean, he's only 21, so that'll come with time. But, I mean, hearing other people talk about him, I mean, he's kind of like one of one. No one wants to put him in a box. No one wants to put a ceiling on it. You even talk to scouts. I mean, it's hard to find scouts that even want to, try to nitpick him. I know there's a lot made of, like, his strikeout rate, and that's an area that he has to cut down on. But you also have to remember, I mean, that last year was his first full year in the minor leagues, and he ended up, player of the month in Double-A his first month there, youngest player in the league. So he's doing a lot of things that, are kind of unheard of. I mean, no one's really gone from playing in the Dominican Summer League to Double-A as quickly as he has. So I don't think anyone wants to put a cap on his potential. I just think it's going to be tough for him to make the opening day roster. That door's probably close to closed. Mm-hmm. But, if he has a good start to the year, I wouldn't be shocked if early in the season, May or June, his name comes up a lot more too.
Votto and Senzel, I mean, I read your stuff every single day. You're all over it. I know they said initially when spring training started, David Bell, paraphrasing, basically said that, hey, look, Votto will let him know when he's ready to go to start playing in games. Are you getting any kind of vibe or feel on that?
Not yet. I mean, you can tell he's not 100. The Joey Votto 100%. He's swinging all right. Throwing, you can tell a little bit of limitations there. But there's so many things that he feels like he has to be able to do before he's playing in games. Like getting jammed on a pitch, check swings, that type of thing with coming off shoulder surgery that I think, not that he's scared to do, but just things he hasn't done yet. Dove on it in drills. So, I mean, I think he's getting there. I just think. I don't think opening day to him is the end all be all. If he misses a couple weeks, and has to stay in Arizona and extended spring training, and then feels 100% in late April, I think he's 100% comfortable doing that because he's coming off a year where he didn't perform, and I think he knows in his mind, if he wants to continue his career, entering the last year, guaranteed year of his contract, he has to perform, and so I think that's something in his mind. Okay, if I'm healthy. He's really confident he'll play well if he's healthy and has a full season. But I think he's kind of learned, okay, I can't push it just because the schedule says opening day starts in 3 weeks. So I don't expect him to be ready for opening day. But you can tell he's progressed, from the start of the spring.
All right, walk me through before we let you go because I know you're busy. We know about basically the top 3 starters in the rotation in no particular order, Green, Lodolo, Ashcraft. After that, Chase Anderson, guy I've been around the block. He throws a couple of scoreless innings yesterday. He's 35. Anderson's had a nice career. He's had a really nice career. Would he be in the mix, and who else is in the mix for the final couple of spots in this rotation that we can start keeping an eye on the rest of the spring?
I think Luke Weaver is probably your number 4 starter, guy they brought in on a 1-year contract.
Well, you wrote a great piece on him, by the way. Great piece on him.
Thanks. And it's just one of those, like, you can tell the way the coaches talk about him, the way he's kind of, feels comfortable, getting used to things, trying out different pitches. It's just different than a guy competing for a spot. You can almost tell, like, okay, he's got an edge up. And then the number 5, I think Luis Sessa or Brandon Williamson. I think those are probably your top 2 candidates for that one. Maybe Connor Overton. He's had some struggles in spring training games, but had some success last year. Those are your probably 3 guys. Chase Anderson looked good yesterday. He's just in minor league camp. Isn't with the big leaguers. Not that he can't move over if he continues to have success, but I think he's probably more of a guy that starts in the minor leagues and is more starting depth behind that. Or even in the bullpen. Could be a guy they look at turning into a reliever and bringing him up that way. But I'd put Sessa and Williamson are probably the 2 that I'd watch closely from here on out. Okay,
actually, I lied to you. One last thing. I'm just kind of curious. Nobody's picking the Reds to be any good. That doesn't mean they won't be any good. Trying to think of how to ask this correctly. Do you think that they will be open to the idea? And whether it's Encarnacion-Strand, whether it's De La Cruz, and, neither one of those guys are in that boat yet where Chris Bryant was a few years ago about, you want him to go to the minor leagues and get, avoid the service time and the clock starting, blah, blah, blah. Do you think the Reds are going to be open-minded to bringing up young players this year, whereas maybe they have not been in the past?
Yeah, I definitely do think so. I mean, it's one of those, if you really wanted to play service time games, I think they would have done it with Hunter Green last year, and he was on the opening day roster. I mean, he was a guy who he's pitched, I think, fewer than 100 minor league innings in his career going to last year. Nick Lodolo, same thing. I mean, he had an injury-filled 2021 season, I think threw less than 50 innings, and then ended up in the opening day rotation. So, I mean, with those 2 guys, they were both the first pitchers taken in their draft classes, top 10 picks. I mean, if you really wanted to play service time games, you could have done it there. Jonathan India was on the opening day lineup. Alexis Diaz, another guy. So I don't think that's really a consideration. I think they look at it as, if these guys come up, we want them to stay up. You kind of see like Jose Barrero, I think, is kind of not a cautionary tale, but if you push a guy too hard, too early, and then has the ups and downs, you don't want to kill his confidence that way. So I think that's more the concern versus, worried about service time games, because I do think they want to be viewed as a contender as early as, if they're not next year, 2025 at the latest. But I think they're looking at next year as a year. If the starting pitchers can take a step forward, as okay, with this 2024 season should be a year where the Reds feel like they're more of a contender.
All right, Bobby, we thank you so much for your generous time and expertise, and enjoy the sunshine out there in Arizona. We'll catch up with you sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, Bobby Nightingale Jr. He's all over the Redlegs, 24/7.